Hello and welcome to Train Signal. You're watching video number 18, Installing and Administering Linux FTP Server. This is part of Fast Track CBT Video, Linux Networking and Administration. So in this video we're going to be talking exclusively about Linux FTP Server. We're going to go into Add Remove Packages and install it, and then we're going to learn about administering Linux FTP Server. Then back at the Big Sky Fishing Supply Company, we have an excellent scenario to test out whether or not our FTP server really works and learn how to do some basic configuration on it. So with that, let's get started. First off, let's talk about installing Linux FTP Server. Now, FTP is the File Transfer Protocol, and it uses TCP to transfer files across a network. It works on the client and server principle, where you have an FTP server and you have an FTP client. The client connects to the server and either uploads or downloads files. The client authenticates with a username and a password. Now, Fedora Linux does not come with an FTP server installed, but you can install the FTP server manually. Now, when installing the FTP server from the package manager, you're actually installing a program called VSFTPD, and that stands for the Very Secure FTP Daemon. The website for this application is vsftpd.beast.org, and the source for VSFTP is freely available at this website, so you can take the source and compile it for whatever version of Linux you're running. In our case, we already have a precompiled version that we can easily install through the package manager. Now, from the VSFTPD website, here are the features that they list that VSFTPD offers. It offers virtual IP configurations, so you can make one server into multiple FTP servers. You do this by adding new IP addresses to a server. So you have, say, 5 IP addresses on a server, and you set up VSFTPD to answer to every one of those different IP addresses, and every one of the different IP addresses represents a different FTP directory and a different FTP server, if you will. You can have virtual users that go along with those virtual servers. You can have it can run standalone, or it can run under inetd or zinetd. It has powerful per user configurability, so you can go into the configuration and say this user can do this and this user can't. It has bandwidth throttling, so people don't, suck down all the bandwidth on your network downloading FTP files. It has per source IP configurability, so when a certain device or certain IP address connects to the server, that IP address can have certain, features or access. And it has per source IP limits, so you say when this IP address connects to us, it can only do these things. It supports IP version 6, and it supports encryption through an SSL integration program. Now, after installing VSFTPD, you can choose to install 2 other alternate FTP servers. They are Pro FTPD and Pure FTPD. These are just other FTP servers. They're good FTP servers. They're just not the default FTP server that's installed. So now let's learn about administering FTP. Now, the configuration file used to manage VSFTPD is located in etc vsftpd, and it's called vsftpd.conf. This is a large, long text file that you use to edit and configure VSFTPD. Now, you can find the HTML man page for the vsftpd.conf file at this website here. So let's click on that, and let me just show you this man page. This is for the configuration file, not for the actual server, but for the file used to configure it. So the configuration in the file is based on this option equals value. So if you go through here, you can look. Here's an example of an option, allow anonymous SSL. The default is no. So if you set equals yes, then you're allowing anonymous SSL. And if I scroll down through all these options, you can see there are many, many options that can be used to configure VSFTPD. So that's the configuration file there. You can go read it at your leisure. We're going to close this out now and go back to our slides. And I also want to point out that the man page for that configuration file will be on your Fedora system once the VSFTPD server is installed. Now, unfortunately, there's no GUI interface provided in Fedora to manage VSFTPD. You can download something like Webmin and use it to manage VSFTPD. Now, VSFTPD can be run from the Red Hat Services application or under Zinetd, or you can just run it standalone if you choose to. The easiest way to do it is to run it under the Red Hat Services. VSFTPD can be controlled using PAM. PAM is Pluggable Authentication Modules. Now, PAM is used to control authentication for a variety of Linux services, one of them being FTPD. If you want to use PAM, you can go into etsy/pam.d/vsftpd and edit this VSFTPD file here. This controls PAM authentication for VSFTPD. Now, without PAM, you can disable specific user accounts from accessing this FTP server by editing etsy vsftpd/vsftpd.ftp users. Wow, that's a mouthful there. So this .ftp users file is used to disable certain users from accessing the FTP server. You can also use this user list file located in etsy vsftpd to control who can access the server and who can't. That has to be enabled and disabled by editing the vsftpd.com file. So with that, let's move on to our scenario. Now, in our scenario at the Big Sky Fishing Supply Company, they want to use the new Linux server for file transfers. To do this, you need to install the FTP server, and then we have a list of configurations that need to be performed. First off, we want to disable anonymous logon. This is enabled by default, and this is a security concern. Then we want to create a banner. A banner is just a message that pops up when someone accesses the FTP server. We want this banner to say, "Welcome to the Big Sky Fishing Supply FTP server, server 1. Unauthorized login is prohibited." Then we want to allow only S. Jones and F. Smith to access the FTP server. No other user should be allowed, including the root user. Finally, we want to configure the FTP server to run now or be started, and then also when we reboot the server. Then we'll test logging in as S. Jones and F. Smith from the Windows client, as well as trying to log on as an anonymous user and root to see if those work. So with that, we can get started on our new configuration and installation of VSFTPD. So I'm over here on the Linux server, and I've already started up the package manager. Package manager is running. So for us to install VSFTPD, all we do is click on servers here, then check the FTP server box. Notice down here it says 0 of 3 optional packages are selected. If I click on that, it tells me I can also install Pro FTPD and Pure FTPD. These are two other FTP servers. If you have VSFTPD, the primary FTP server, you don't need these, but you could use these instead of FTPD. They have different configurations and options. Here's another program here called X for Status or Stats, which compiles information about file transfers from log files. So let's close this out, and we'll say Apply, and it says, are you sure you want to install VSFTPD? Notice we're installing version 2.04. Now, version 2.04 is the latest and greatest. I checked their website, and so we're fortunate about that. When I tried to install VSFTPD on Fedora Core version 4, it didn't come with the latest and greatest. And for us to get the latest and greatest, we would have had to download the source along with a couple other dependencies that were required, compile the source on Fedora Core version 4, and then we would finally have the latest and greatest version. You would have to do that unless you can find somewhere on the internet a pre-compiled version for Fedora Core version 4. But we're running 5, so luckily we don't have any of that problem. We have the latest and greatest already. So the installation was successful. I'm going to say OK. And now we can go and edit the configuration file and check out the directories where this configuration is stored. So to do that, I'm going to open up a terminal window, and now I'm going to cd into /etc/vsftpd. I'm going to do an ls-l, and you can see here's the FTP users file, here's the user list file, and then here's our main configuration file called vsftpd.conf. So the first thing we wanted to do was to disable anonymous login for our FTP server. So to do that, I'm going to use gedit, and I'm going to use gedit to edit etc vsftpd/vsftpd.conf. Alright, this brings up gedit, our graphical editor, and you can see this is the vsftpd.conf file, and it's a very long file. It has quite a few options in it, but it doesn't have every option that you can use. You have to go in and add your own options, your own values, if you want to add some of those other options that are listed in the man page. So let's go back up to the top, and it says here the very first option is anonymous enabled equals yes. Well, we want this to equal no. That way anonymous logins will be disabled. And it says beware, this is allowed by default if you comment this out. So if I just put a comment there, it's allowed anyway. So the only way to disable it is to say anonymous enable equals no. So that's easy. That's the first thing we needed to do to control anonymous logins and our first step in our scenario. So let's go back to the scenario real quick, and let's see what the next thing was we needed to do. Now we want to create an FTP banner that says welcome to the Big Sky Fishing Supply FTP server, unauthorized login is prohibited. So let's go back here and let's scroll down in the file and look for the banner. Alright, right here. It says you may fully customize the login banner string. Here it is, ftpd_banner equals welcome to the blah FTP service. So I'm going to take out the comment because we don't want that, and then scroll over here and say welcome to the Big Sky Fishing Supply FTP server, server 1. Unauthorized login is prohibited. There we go. So we configured our FTPD banner. That's it right there. So when someone logs into the FTP server, this is the message that they'll get. So that's good. Let's scroll down here, and I saw the next thing we need to do is configure the user list down here, or at least check it out. So down here at the bottom of the file where it says userlist_enable equals yes, this is important. We need this to be here because we're going to use the user list file to specify who's allowed access, whose access is enabled to access the server. Now we need to add something that isn't listed here, which is user list deny equals no. So this is an option that we'll learn about in just a second in the user list file that says basically if the user isn't listed in the user list file, they aren't allowed access, or they are denied access. So we're not using user list deny, we're using this enable, and if they're not in enable, they're not allowed access. It's confusing, I know, but that's how it works. So I'm going to say save right here, and now I'm going to say open, and let's open the user list. We'll say open there. So here it says if user list underscore deny equals no, only allow users in this file. So that's how it works. So what we're going to do is edit this file and only list the two people that we want allowed to access the FTP server. So right here I'm just going to delete all these, and I'm going to put in two names, F. Smith and S. Jones. I'm going to say save right here, and we just saved the user underscore list file with the two names of the only two people allowed access to the FTP server. So now let's close out our gedit session, and now we need to start the FTP server and set it to run automatically. So to do this, I'm going to go to System, Administration, Server Settings, and to Services. Over here on our list of services, if I scroll down to the very bottom, I find VSFTPD. That's our new FTP server. I'm going to check it to run automatically, and I'm going to say save right here to save that. Then I'm going to start it, and it says it was started successfully. And you see here the PID, and it says it's running. So I can close that out. The next thing we need to do is to test it. So let's go over to our Windows client, and we'll try logging in as S. Jones, F. Smith, root, and anonymous, and we'll see which ones work and which ones don't. So to do this, I'm going to go to a command line prompt, a Windows command prompt. Alright, and I'm going to type FTP and the IP address of our FTP server. And hey, there we go. There's our banner. See the banner that says, "Welcome to the Big Sky Fishing Supply FTP server, server 1. Unauthorized login is prohibited." So we got our FTP banner. So let's try logging on as S. Jones. And the password is fishing. And it says login was successful. So Sally Jones can log in. So if I do an ls, I get that I have a desktop file, a file called desktop. I can type pwd, and I'm put in my home directory, home S. Jones. Now from here I could cd to / and do an ls, and there's everything in the root directory. So I can upload and download based on who I am in Linux. If I'm not root, obviously I can't go in here and download or remove or replace a file in the etc directory or the dev directory. So I was able to log in as S. Jones. Now let's log out, and let's log in again, and this time I'll log in as F. Smith. Password's fishing, and I was able to log in. I'll do an ls and a pwd, and I'm in home F. Smith. So that's great. Our two users that we specified should be able to log in, can log in. Now let's quit out. Let's reconnect, and this time I'm going to try to log in as root. Right away, permission denied, login failed. So root cannot log in because root wasn't specified as being able to log in. Now let's quit, and let's try to log in as anonymous. And it says this FTP server does not allow anonymous logins. Permission denied, login failed. So it looks like our test was successful. We're able to log in as the two users we specified, and not as root and not as anonymous. We're able to connect to the FTP server, browse around some directories, and because we can do this, I'm sure we could also transfer files if we wanted to test that. So the test was a success. Let me log out of this. Let's go back to our scenario here. So we just completed our test. We were able to disable anonymous login. We saw that wasn't allowed. We saw our banner. We saw that only these two users could access the server. Obviously the server is running because we were able to connect to it, and it should be running when the server reboots. And we tested all this from the Windows client. So with that, we can move on to our conclusion. And in conclusion, for video number 18, we successfully installed the Linux FTP server. We learned about how it's not installed by default, and the actual server that's installed is called VSFTPD, or Very Secure FTPD. Once you choose to install that, you could choose to install a couple other FTP servers if you wanted to. We found out that there's no graphical configuration tool for VSFTPD, at least that comes with Fedora, and the main configuration file for it is etc vsftpd/vsftpd.conf. Then there's a couple other files there called like FTP users and user list that are used to allow or deny who can and cannot access the FTP server. And then in our scenario with the Big Sky Fishing Supply Company, we tested out how to configure the server, how to install it, how to only allow certain users. We made sure it was running because we were able to FTP to it from our Windows client. So with that, we've reached the end of video number 18, where we learned about installing and administering Linux FTP server. Thank you very much.